Hello, A622 participants. This is Dr. McGinty here. I wanted to go over one of the PowerPoints in the Week 2 module discussing generating program ideas. This week coming up, we're going to be talking about your ideas for your programs, and I imagine that many of you might have some general ideas about what program you want to plan, but then some of you may not have a lot of ideas going at this time. So with that being said, I wanted to give you just a short presentation about some of the things that you might want to consider when you're thinking about your idea for your program plan. So essentially, we want to talk a little bit today about the educational needs and various sources of program ideas. So why would you be doing the program in the first place? Some techniques that you might use for generating your program ideas, what role needs assessment might play in program planning, and then how to prioritize and sort the needs once you've identified them. So there's a couple different categories of educational needs. There are some felt expressed needs, things that, we kind of have a hunch about. There's normative needs, things that we know need to be planned into certain educational experiences. And then there's the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you've seen, which most of you have probably seen Maslow's hierarchy, we have at the very bottom end, we have to have safety and security before we can move on to the higher levels. So just kind of thinking about the context of the place that you're working or the organizational context of which you're going to plan your program, maybe the community context. There's various places of the participants and the organization of where they are with the hierarchy of needs. Thinking about that and satisfaction and needs, that, typically satisfaction is achieved when you have what you want and where you are, and if you can get closer to where you want to be, then that could create satisfaction. Another, when you have a different need is satisfied and the first need is ignored. So maybe if you have one thing that's competing with another, say in certain organizations you're providing programs to low resource learners. If they have a need to receive education to pass the GED, however they don't have transportation to get to those classes, then they may not be able to get to that need for education. That's just kind of a quick overview. There's a lot more of that competing need issue that can come up in program planning. Satisfaction of the first need is postponed until later, or satisfaction of the first need could be abandoned. So sometimes we have to look at all the different types of things that are coming into the context when you're looking at planning a program to make sure that you are fulfilling the needs and making sure that people can be successful within the program context. So thinking a little bit more about how needs and motivation are related, we can think about if we need something, and kind of thinking about the case of maybe a nutrition education. If there's a need to eat healthy because you've been diagnosed with disease and eating healthy will help you with that, you might have the motivation to change your behavior. If you do that, you might find satisfaction. However, if the need is that you need to start eating healthy, but you have weak motivation, maybe you don't have your lower level needs being provided for. Maybe you can't afford healthy food. Maybe you don't know how to cook. Maybe you don't know what healthy foods are. That could lead to weak motivation and thus also a weak behavior, and that's going to cause no or limited satisfaction. And then in the last example, we had that competes with, if you have this need of healthy eating and you have strong motivation because you feel supported and you feel like you have the knowledge, you have a high degree of self-efficacy, which is the feeling that you could be successful, that you have what you need to succeed, then that's going to lead to a strong behavior and thus to satisfaction in accomplishing the goals. Normative needs, thinking about that, is basically an educational need, a discrepancy between what presently exists and what should be. Sometimes the discrepancy is clear. Someone may need a certification for employment or to develop a specific skill for promotion. Other times, though, the needs are not so clear. The receptionist with many years as a servicer may be required to participate in a corporate phone training program. I can think of this when we have to do a lot of trainings related to work that maybe someone has passed down over time, that you're always doing this training, but these required trainings may not seem like something that you really feel is valuable or worthwhile to your job. And then agreeing on this discrepancy, as well as what is and what should be, can cause friction and dissent in an organization. So if some people think that these needs are important and this training has to be done, and other people think that it's sort of a waste of time, then there's going to cause some friction and some issues. So some ways to think about how to identify these normative needs. They can surface through both an informal and formal processes. There's 4 primary sources there. So you have people. Someone points out the need, a friend, a colleague, an employer say, hey, we really need everybody to be on board. Everyone needs to know how to use social media. That's something that people might identify. Lived experience, so like I mentioned in the health example, or being a parent, a student, your experience points out a need. Maybe you've been have poor health and you need to change your diet. Maybe you've become a new parent and you need to learn now some skills for parenting. There's also organizations can identify some of that change when your company gets a new computer system, when something happens at work, someone has a heart attack and now they want to have the defibrillators there. So some things, or learning CPR could be brought on by an organization. And then there's the context of society. So war breaks out, methadone clinic opens near your home. These types of needs start to develop within the society. So thinking about program ideas, this talks about 10 common techniques of generating these ideas. So you could develop a questionnaire or a survey. You might make observations. I think a lot of you might go from this aspect. You might just observe something in your community, in your workplace, that you feel is a need for a program, for some type of training, education. We don't have a lot of time, so doing interviews or having focus groups might be a little bit lengthy for developing a program in this context. But when you're developing programs as someone in an organization in adult education, you might follow these different things here, such as organizational data, social data, informal conversations too. That might be something that might spur an interest in wanting to develop a program. So needs assessments, just going to kind of quickly talk about this here. This last bullet, most planners do not use formal needs assessments. Needs assessments are often done in an instructional design context when we're designing instruction. However, it's, they're very structured, that it's hard to get the results you want when you're thinking about developing a program, and it takes way too long and lots of resources. So needs assessment finds problems, not solutions. And so that's going to be not in the context of program planning. With that being said, though, Caffarella does have a 10-point needs assessment that's a little bit more of a truncated version of a full formal needs assessment. And that kind of ties back to the previous slide of where you could look at, interviewing people, having focus groups, doing all of these things with these 10 points to get at and gather some data on, what are the needs for this program. This is something that might take place within an organization when you're planning a program. But you won't go into the full detailed needs assessment like as we've talked about in other courses when we're designing instruction. We'll save that for later when you're designing instruction for your program. But when you're designing programs, you really want to figure out a way to develop a team of people, figure out what type of data you need, how you're going to collect it, how you're going to analyze it, sort and prioritize, and then communicate that to the appropriate people. So thinking about sorting and prioritizing needs, you'll have a lot of ideas and you'll need to decide what to do first. This is really relevant for our class. You probably have many ideas that you're thinking about. So you want to decide, what are you going to do? And thinking about the needs. Is it an educational need? Should this need be solved or addressed with an educational event? Some things you just need to change policy or create a website or a handbook, but a full-fledged program may not be what is needed for the idea that you have. So you want to think about that and think about your ideas and think about how your ideas tie into the need for an educational program. So thinking about further sorting program ideas, often you want to talk to people. We're going to be doing that in this week 2 discussion, where you want to talk about and think about who's going to be impacted by the program. You want to talk to other people who might be familiar with this context that you're thinking about developing a program. In this course, in the discussion, we may not really be having a lot of opportunity to talk to other people outside of the class, but we can certainly put our ideas forward and talk with each other to determine if this is a relevant idea for a program. So some other factors that you want to think about affecting program needs is people, and then organizational and environmental factors, and cost. This is something you don't really have to hone in on completely for this week, but you want to keep these things in the back of your mind, because you want to have an idea of are these people going to participate, and do we have the context idea in our mind, both internal and external? This is a critical step here, is figuring out if the people that you're developing this program for are actually going to find this program relevant. Also, will this work within the context that you've selected? And then cost. Is there staff and money available? That one won't come as much into play in this situation, but it might in a real program planning aspect. So for prioritizing the educational needs, what this essentially means is assessing both the program's importance and feasibility. So, you might find the program important, but is everybody else going to find it important? And is it feasible? Is this relevant to the organization or the community or the place where you wish to develop your program? You must have an understanding of your context, the values, and the power relationships that exist in it. Power relationships could be all kinds of things. It could be within the community, within the organization, and on all different levels between management, supervisors, who's going to be delivering the program, etc. And that's all I have for this PowerPoint. I just wanted to give you a little bit more context in, on what that you're going to be thinking about for this week. So think about, different ideas that you have for your programs, and put them in the week 2 discussion, and we'll talk further about that. If you have specific questions about anything in this PowerPoint or in the readings for this week, feel free to ask them in either the week 2 discussion or in the course questions discussion forum. But just thinking about, pick a program that is interesting to you and that you think would be relevant to the community or the organization that you wish to deliver it.